So some of you may know I moved sort of recently, and there were a lot of boxes. And there still are a lot of boxes. So the mount that I use for the camera that usually films these green screen vlogs, it's still in a box somewhere in the mountain right behind you guys. So I guess today we'll find out if people watch these for the dramatic camera angle or if it's for the info. So let's talk a little bit about Unity, which is a game engine that's been in the news a lot this week because they just changed their pricing structure. They're a really big popular game engine. There's Unity and Unreal are sort of the two big ones, and there's been a lot of coverage, but also I feel like I have a little bit of firsthand experience here because back in 2015, I actually released a game of my own called Fortress Fury, and that was made using Unity. And so I can speak a bit to, based on how our game, Fortress Fury, performed, how that might have been different with Unity's new pricing structure. So one of the reasons why Unity has been so popular up to this point is it's very cheap. If you just want to get started on making a game as like a solo developer, it's basically free. It's free as long as you're making under $100,000 each 12-month rolling cycle. You can do whatever you want. You can develop a game. You can release it on whatever store. Up to that, you don't have to pay anything. And so it was seen as a really great deal and a great accessible engine to get into for indie developers. And a lot of indie developers have used Unity and released their games with it. Despite this history of offering really good value on its product, Unity is not a charity. It's a for-profit company, and a publicly listed one at that. So that actually offers some interesting insights, which we will go over in this video. But it's clear that up until this point, their accessible offerings have not been contributing enough to the bottom line. They've been posting quarterly losses for basically forever since they've been listed, and they decided to attempt to change that drastically by this week, offering new pricing models for their game engine. So this is what it looks like now. And the big headline that you might have heard about is that for Unity Personal, which was previously completely free up to making $100,000 in the past 12 months, now has a revenue and install threshold of 200,000 and, the keyword here is and, not or, and 200,000 lifetime installs of the game. If you hit that threshold while on a personal license, you will then be charged 20 cents every time someone installs the game from that point forward. So instead of going for a revenue share model like Unreal Engine, they are simply charging a flat rate per every install someone does of the game of 20 cents. This is less of a problem if, say, you are selling like a $30 game and now you have to take an additional 20 cents off of every single purchase, but it offers some concerns for things like free-to-play games or games that are offered via bundles, subscription services like Game Pass, and also potential piracy issues and things like that. The headline here really is personal and plus, because the other subscriptions, Pro and Enterprise, which cost a lot more on a flat rate yearly basis, they still do have this install fee, but it gets gradually lessened as more and more installs happen, such that with Enterprise, over 1 million installs on your game, you're paying a cent per install. There are some additional discounts for emerging market countries as well, but these are sort of the headline figures, and the focus really is on the personal and plus 20 cent per install in perpetuity forever, as long as you hit the $200,000 in revenue and 200,000 lifetime installs. To be clear, again, it's $200,000 in revenue, not profits. So that's $200,000 in revenue, but you may have a team of several developers, all of whom potentially command pretty high salaries, right? And so $200,000 doesn't actually go a very long way when it comes to employing software engineers. I should also add, this isn't effective immediately. It's set to go live January of next year. But needless to say, a lot of the gaming and game developer community is not very happy about these changes, and Unity will have had to know that before announcing it. So why would they do it? Well, money, obviously, because regardless of the public perception, Unity has been losing money as a company for quite some time. If you look at their past couple of years of quarterly results, you'll notice it's pretty much all negative earnings per share, except I can't tell if these couple here may have been right about break even. But interestingly enough, in their last earnings report, they came in very, very negative, much more negative than analyst expectations. This green dot down here, around below negative 50 cents earnings per share, is well lower than the expectations of right about break even, it looks like. And this is coming in their last report before they announced this new pricing change. So I don't know if that's coincidental. It could be, or it could be, oh, frick. This was not a good quarter, something's gotta change. Rather than just looking at earnings, we can look at share price as well, because you could have a company posting loss after loss after loss, but the share price could still be going up and up and up if investors view the company's future earning potentials as getting better despite the current day losses. Unfortunately, that hasn't really been the case with Unity stock, which went public at right about $70 in 2020 and is now sitting at $36, down 47%, in the middle of which, though, they peaked near $200. Now, you could also say that there are a bunch of macroeconomic factors contributing to this. Growth stocks aren't being looked at as favorably now as they were in mid-2021 during the pandemic, but still, if you're in charge of Unity, you're thinking, this isn't good, and let's do something about it. And this is what they elected to do about it. There's actually one more insight I want to share about the share price, but I'm going to leave that for the end of the video as a dramatic finale. For now, let's look at how this could actually impact developers, and also focus on what are the big concerns with this sort of pricing model. I think the first and biggest issue is that by introducing a pricing model like this, you are creating a conflict of interest between the game engine and the developer, in that you are basically disincentivizing a developer from making a game that can reach as many people as possible to instead focusing on, okay, well, I need to try to just extract as much value out of every single user as I can, so that maybe I can just not get that many users, but I can make a lot of money so it can offset that 20-cent per install fee. Because the real issue comes if you have a game that goes super wide, gets a ton of downloads, but doesn't monetize really well, but maybe just ticks that $200,000 revenue threshold, but maybe you've got 10 or 20 million installs on that. You're just not super optimized in your monetization because that was a bit of an afterthought for you at the time. And that kind of leads into Fortress Fury, interestingly enough, and I'll get back to that in just a second, but this is in contrast to Unreal Engine, where they have a straight-up revenue share. A 5% royalty is due only if you're distributing an off-the-shelf product, and it exceeds $1 million in revenue. So you're incentivized. Grow the game as much as you can. Doesn't matter how many people download it. If you make a lot of money, yeah, it's a bigger check to us, but it's staying at 5%. So the more money you make, the more money we make, vice versa, and our interests are aligned, rather than you now have a situation where you're trying to game the system so that you're extracting as much from as few people as you possibly can because of this per instance fee that's going to hit you no matter what. This segues us pretty well into talking about Fortress Fury, because Fortress Fury, it got a lot of downloads, but the monetization was not really well optimized. I mean, to be frank, the game itself wasn't really well optimized either, and maybe that contributed as well. But in any case, let me back up in case you're not familiar with Fortress Fury. I worked with a partner, and we employed a game development studio in order to develop this game. It was released as a free-to-play mobile game in 2015, and it did really, really well off the chart, just didn't really have audience retention, and we weren't able to roll out additional updates. And just to be completely transparent, it was pretty expensive. It was about $40,000 a month to develop the game for however many months it was up until it released. So even if we were making $200,000, that would not have covered ongoing development costs. And we would have now, if Unity had rolled out this new pricing structure, been paying 20 cents per install. Let me tell you how bad that would have been. We didn't hit $200,000 in revenue, but say we had around 3 million installs of the game. So if we had ticked over that $200,000 in revenue, remember, you owe 20 cents per install. We would have been hit with a $600,000 bill for the 20 cents per install. We would have been doomed. We would not have been able to cover that bill. The game was not generating that much. Yes, you might say, well, you should have optimized your game better. And yeah, maybe we should have, probably would have been better, but you never know until the game is released. And there are also a lot of developers, just solo folks who are, doing it on their own. And that's a bit of an afterthought. They just want to put out something they put together that they think is fun without having to worry about how do I cover that 20 cents per download by making sure that every user is worth at least 20 cents, if not more, especially if it's a free-to-play game where there's no upfront cost. Now, you could say the irony is that Unity might have gone into their business with the same, valuing the growth versus the revenue, and therefore they're changing it, and so should you, with you developing your games now. Be more thoughtful about the sustainability of monetization. But regardless, we would have been wrecked with Fortress Fury as soon as if we had ticked over the $200,000 in revenue, because not only would we have the development costs not fully getting covered, now we would have just been smacked with that bill. Now, again, maybe we would have been on one of the different Unity plans, Pro, Enterprise, so on and so forth. But regardless, we wouldn't have had that extra money to be paying on top of what we already were for development. But hey, let's look at this from a different lens. A lot of people really hate free-to-play games, and they much prefer paying a flat rate for a game up front, and then the game has no microtransactions. It's just one and done. And maybe this will push more developers into not making free-to-play games. And you think that's a good thing because it's going to push the industry in the right direction. Well, there are some other issues that presents even with games that have an upfront payment. There are things like piracy. And you have to wonder, yes, despite the fact that Unity is claiming, we'll be able to know when it's piracy, be able to discount fraudulent installs of the game, and that won't count against you. You don't know how well those fraud detection software implementations are going to work. So you're really relying on them to hold up their end of the bargain. And if you think that there's been some fraud, but they disagree, how are you going to, settle that dispute? And so beyond just piracy, especially when it comes to something like a free-to-play game, what if, someone downloads the game and they're like, this sucks, I hate it. Or a group comes together and they're like, we hate the person who made this game. And that could totally be a thing for like a YouTuber. They release a free-to-play game and people who really hate this YouTuber, they come together and like, let's just install bomb the game. And Unity says, well, we're not going to charge a fee for fraudulent installs or install bombing. We'll work with you. You're kind of just trusting the word there, right? And you're hoping that they will understand and know and be able to see that these were fraudulent installs. These weren't real players. This was someone who was trying to attack you maliciously. But you never know how that's going to turn out. Beyond that, I had mentioned earlier, there's concern about things like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. And I do find the answer funny here. Will developers be charged the Unity runtime fee for subscription-based games? No. In this case, the developer's not distributing it, so we're not going to invoice the developer. But they say they're going to invoice, like, Nintendo and Microsoft and Sony, and I'm like, I mean, is that settled already? Did they already sign the paperwork there? Or are they just like, it's definitely going to be that way? And Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo, they're like, what? What are you guys talking about? We're not paying that. Like, I'm really curious. Was this already settled, or is this kind of like, we're gonna figure it out and somebody's gonna pay? But anyway, it all comes back to this conflict of interest, right? It's not gonna feel good to be a developer and be worrying, oh God, too many people installing my game? Do too many people like what I've created and I didn't optimize the monetization enough in order to account for this? And even on a game where you're charging an upfront cost, say it's $10, well, if people pirate the game, you're like, well, okay, they say they're gonna not count that, but what if it doesn't work out that way? And then not only am I not getting revenue, I'm actually paying for the pirated copies of the game. And that doesn't sound very fair. And then on the other end, on Unity's side, while yes, they say they will forgive fraudulent and pirated installs of the game, it's not actually in their interest as a business financially to do so. So it sort of puts them in the same situation as an insurance company, where the insurance company tries to make it as difficult as possible to actually get a payout. They may try to make it so you have a bunch of hoops to jump through here in order to make it more difficult to get you to have those fraudulent installs forgiven, or say, well, we don't really know for sure that it's fraud. I don't know how it's going to pan out. Maybe they do their absolute best, but you still know that they are on the opposite side of you, rather than with a revenue share, having the interests perfectly aligned. You make more money, they make more money. As I mentioned earlier, I had one more insight I wanted to share about the share price of Unity. So I want to look at the last week of stock performance, and you'll see that the stock is down. They announced the change to pricing on the 12th, and since then the stock is trading lower. And you're thinking to yourself, well, yeah, duh. They announced a thing that a lot of people hate and disagree with, so of course the stock is trading lower. Except that's not really how it works. When it comes to trading and investing, cast aside all your morals, okay? If a company announces a change to their policy that investors think is going to contribute a lot of money to the company sustainably for a long time, the share price is going to go up. Even if it's like a super disagreeable, immoral change, the share price is still going to go up. So the fact that the share price hasn't gone up here means that despite the fact that this was rolled out, obviously, in an effort to put more money into their bottom line, investors actually aren't so sure that this is going to play out.